Hello, welcome to the Ultrascape Podcast. This is episode 1, so welcome if you're listening you are listening for the first time. This podcast is going to be all about the world of ultracycling and bikepacking, and I'm joined by Beccy Waters, who is going to be my co-host. So,
Hi,
Becky.
Josh.
So, if you're watching this on YouTube, you most likely have seen the kind of things I've been doing before, with the daily race coverage of events like the Tour Divide and the Transcontinental Race. But this podcast is hopefully going to fill the gaps and allow us to cover the wider spectrum of ultracycling and bikepacking. And we can cover more races and, generally bring the kind of the community and, the scene to a wider audience. And Beccy is joining me. So I think we should probably do some introductions, Beccy. Should we introduce each other, or
your idea to introduce each other, I think, has made my job a lot easier, given I think a lot of people here are probably listening for you. So I'll kick it off with your introduction. Josh is Josh Ibbett. To most of you, that's probably enough of an introduction, but to those who it isn't, Josh has been racing since rim brakes were a thing, I believe, and he is probably most well known for his win on the Transcontinental 2015, I believe. And since then, he's slowly been slipping down the rankings to about 8th position at Atlas Mountain earlier this year. And I think in order to kind of complement the racing that he's been doing, Josh has he started his race commentary that he's been doing for a couple of years now, which most people will probably know him for. And aside from all of that, he's quite good company, which is why he's roped me into this and got me on camera having brushed my hair for the first time in a while. That's it. Do you want any more?
Right. So I guess thanks for the very kind introduction, Beccy. And it's my turn to introduce you. So I better scratch out what I was going to say and say some nice things about you. So Beccy she's ridden numerous events, including finishing a Transcontinental Race, which was 2017 or 18?
19.
Or 19. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
This is why Beccy's here, because Beccy's actually quite good at numbers and facts, which I'm not so good at. So yeah, so I think this should be fact checked, and we can hold Beccy accountable for that. Also finished the Highland Trail Race up in Scotland. She's also, you started the Silk Road Mountain Race in 2023, didn't you? But you didn't finish. However, I think the caveat there is you had just ridden the Pamir Highway to Kyrgyzstan, and I've asked a few people who've done that before, and they say that's just the worst possible thing to do, because you pretty much just get ill on the Pamir Highway.
Well, they are right.
Not ideal preparation for it's not ideal preparation for the Silk Road Mountain Race. However, obviously, it does mean that Beccy has a lot of experience and knowledge about these things. She's also cycled from her home in the UK to Kathmandu in Nepal, which I believe is one of your first big trips.
The very first. My kit list was almost identical to the things you'd done before that, because I just ordered everything you'd done, Josh, for your many tours.
Sorry about that, because I was taking a lot of risks at that time, so it was probably an uncomfortable experience. So that is Beccy's kind of, I guess, racing history. Well, most of it. She probably has won more bike races than many of us, because you're actually a bit of a talented road race sprinter, aren't you?
I wouldn't say that, but I'll let you say it.
Okay, well, I've said it. It does beg the question how you've gone from winning bunch sprints to the polar opposite discipline of cycling with ultra endurance. But not only that, Beccy has also been instrumental in Dotwatcher CC over the years, which has obviously been doing written reports about all these races. So Beccy knows a lot about lots of races. She's covered races on the ground, journalist. So yeah, hopefully Beccy's sort of knowledge is going to be really, really useful and important, and we can have some really good sort of chats about the races, the results, the people, and bring the whole thing to life a little bit more.
Thank you, Josh.
Of course,
my introduction to you sounds subpar now. You might need to do it again.
Well, you can try again next week or next month. So obviously, thanks to Beccy for agreeing to join me. And we have a sponsor as well. So a big thank you to Redshift. So if you've been watching my race coverage, you know they've supported some of my coverage over the year. So they do things like the shock stop stems and seat posts. I've raced with them with the seat posts and the stems, depending on which bike I'm on. And they do some really great different handlebars. So the aim is just to make your bike more comfortable. So yeah, check out redshift.com, and we've got a bit of a discount code as well, so check out the show notes or the description underneath if you're watching on YouTube, and give them a bit of support. And big thank you to those guys. So Beccy, over to you for the next segment.
Thanks for that, Josh. I guess we move on to the meat of the podcast now, and we're starting that with the news. We've picked out a few things that we've come across over the past few weeks ahead of 2025 and rounding up some of 2024's racing. We thought it was right, given that the last time we actually saw each other was at the launch for the Transcontinental Route next year at their launch evening in London at a brewery, which is always dangerous. We thought it best to start this segment with a conversation about the Transcontinental's route for next year, the changes in general about the race, and also their new 100 TCR women's campaign, which they have released in order to try and encourage more women at the race. And their overall goal is to reach 100 women on the start line, which is a bold goal. I think they had 41 or 42 women at the start line this year, and that was the biggest field they've ever had. So they're looking at more than doubling the number of women they've had. And while it is a big goal, there was something that Hannah, one of the co-organisers at Lost, said at the launch evening, was that they're aiming for 100 women. And much like any rider who starts the Transcontinental, not getting to 100 women or not getting to the finish line is not a failure. Getting anywhere further than what they've already had till date or getting past the start line is already a win. And Josh can probably say a bit more about the route, given he's released a video about this and some interviews with the organisers from that evening.
Yeah, so for more details, obviously, check out the video I did with a bit of sort of screenshots and stuff over on YouTube. Well, I think one of the key things about the women's 100 campaign is it was obviously the race has grown over the years. So in the first one I did in 2014, I think there was maybe one, possibly two women on the start line. And I think it grew a bit more in 2015, but the race was much smaller. And I think the percentage of women taking part from the overall field has grown very slowly over the years, but it's still not as high as it could be. And you see races like the Highland Trail 550 and they can get, well, Alan promotes 50% of women on the start line, which is great to see. So, I guess you need to set a high goal. So yeah, hopefully, if you're interested, they have a series of webinars and things with previous winners. I think Jana Kessenheimer's doing one. Who else is on the panel for that? I can't remember.
Fiona Kolbinger.
Of course, yeah, the first woman to win the Transcontinental race overall, which I think is a key point as well, because it's not about just watts and power and all of these things. You've got to be smart, and I think Fiona's win was just it's like the perfect race, really, in a lot of respects, in terms of being organised, good route planning, knowing all the things, managing herself
on her first race as well.
On her first race, yeah. I mean, it's just incredible, really, isn't it?
Mm.
But it just goes to show, man, that the ultra racing, that's why we like it. And generally, not just the women's field now, but the men's field, you're seeing more and more, ex-pros coming in with massive engines, all the power in the world. Doesn't mean they're going to win a race.
No.
And that's what's exciting.
On the Women's 100 campaign, you mentioned if anyone is interested, there is the hashtag 100TCR Women, and you can search for that in Instagram's Explore page. And it has all the women who've raced previous Lost races, including TCR, have put up posts about what racing TCR or the other Lost races have done for them. And it's just quite an inspiring thing to look at. I was surprised to see that Lost have released this campaign alongside this year's TCR route, because it is such a long route. How much do you total it to be?
I've not done the calculations, but talking to Andrew at the launch, he reckoned it would have been the longest one ever. I think one of the other longest ones was the one I won in 2015, which had similar kind of locations.
Mm-hmm.
That was 2,600 miles. So I imagine it's going to be over that, sort of 2,700 miles. Don't know what that is in K. I'm sure
I think
I'll
around
get...
the late 4,000s.
Yeah, I'm a miles guy, so sorry. I know people get angry about that.
Well, over here in the future, Josh, in kilometres, they normally total around 4,000 K in a race, and they're looking at closer to 5K, I think.
Yeah.
And it's
but there are some flatter sections as well, so that obviously does push things along.
True. It's not just the mountains. They also have their points jersey, which I think is so exciting, because they don't have enough stuff to do already. Totaling this as they go is another thing to add to the to-do list.
And we had some experience of that kind of thing at the Tour de Farce in Scotland with the their points jersey. It's a small event, and maybe we'll touch on that a little bit more later on when we get onto our sort of year in review. But essentially, they had sort of time segments, which was quite fun, and it's made a race within a race. And yeah, it was quite enjoyable, I think.
Farcical,
so I guess that kind of it was very farcical. So I think that probably sums up the TCR stuff. There's loads of stuff out there on the internet, and there will be more. So keep an eye on like the Lost Instagram, the Transcontinental Race Instagram, and I'm sure we'll touch on it in the upcoming podcasts over the next few months. What else have we got on new race route launches?
The next race that I've put on the list is the Unknown Race. Unlike Lost, you can keep following the Unknown Race's Instagram, but you won't learn anymore because the point is we don't know. All we really know, exactly. All we really know is the race starts in Lucca in Italy, and it's normally about 1,000 kilometers, I believe, which is about 600 miles. Josh?
Yes.
Here we go. And it's normally full of a lot of climbing because it's typically been around the Alps. So I don't know how this Italian version will work. So while we really don't know much about the route, what we do know is the start list. And there are a couple of big names on it. But what was interesting for me was seeing a couple of organisers' names on it. So Hannah Larbalestier from Losto is racing the Unknown Race, which is quite a good reminder that organisers still need to find a time in the calendar to do their own racing. And alongside Hannah Larbalestier, there is one of the race's organisers, Jan Willem Bobbink, who has always been my point of contact for the race. And I think this is the first time he'll actually be riding himself. But the Unknown Race is organised by a team of guys who raced the Two Volcanoes Sprint in 2022. And there's a brilliant photo of them at the end of the riders' party. They are just slumped over on the sofas, having drank too much and not slept enough for the previous few days. And it's not quite how you'd imagine the genesis of a race to come together, but from that they have developed the Unknown Race, which has become something of I think of it as a season opener for the road racing calendar, and it's quite a good, perhaps what the Dauphiné is to World Tour road racing, and that is the extent of my knowledge of World Tour road racing. What the Dauphiné is to the Tour de France, the Unknown Race is to the other European road races later in the season.
It's the warm-up. It's like the what was it, the Route du Sud or something like that in southern France in February.
And
anyway,
hopefully it will be warm in Italy.
We're getting off topic here, talking about road racing. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
I think actually that's a really good point, that many of the people that now organise and run races, they've started somewhere. I mean, even tracing the routes all the way back certainly in Europe, with the Transcontinental Race itself, Mike Hall, he'd ridden Tour de Var beforehand, and was inspired to create something that was more accessible in Europe. And then people like Nelson Trees, who organises the mountain races, so Atlas, Silk Road, and Hellenic. He actually, his first TCR was, I think, 2015, the year I was there. And even people like Andrew and Hannah, they've raced the Atlas Mountain Race. I think Andrew's actually on the start line in February in Morocco, and he's also won races himself as well. So yeah, it's kind of really key, I think, to have raced to be able to organise a good race. And I think maybe riders or organisers who haven't raced as much, you can probably tell in the race that maybe they're not as sort of tuned in to what racers need at certain times. That does transition quite nicely to another route launch from Nelson.
Because we are nothing if not professionals, Josh.
This always seamless once it's all edited, so it's fine. The Silk Road Mountain Race, edition 7. I did a video on YouTube with a bit more detail, but that's going to be another long one. It's a year of long races, isn't it? Nelson reckons it's going to be the longest Silk Road. I can't remember how much that was, even though I talked about it the other day. Becky, do you have any facts for us that we can rely on?
Well, I also don't know the distance or any of the elevation, but I do remember one stat that Nelson shared was there's a fairly meaty hiker bike in it, which is set.
Well,
he set 30 kilometers, 25 kilometers,
and
that's a day out.
And 30.
That's a day's walk.
Yeah. Well, I actually saw Nelson the other week, and I chatted to him on the video about the route, and he basically said it's you've got to expect 24 hours walking. So as good as. You got to plan for it, and obviously food as well. And there's some big remote sections. There's like 420 kilometers, whatever that is in miles. I need to figure it out. Without any resupply as well at altitude. So it's going to be tricky. It's maybe not the most mountainous route that there has been in terms of the number of actual high passes. There's a lot of time at altitude and a lot of big gaps between resupply. So that's going to be interesting to look at. And so, yeah, like I said, I did a full video on YouTube with a bit more detail. And I'm sure it's one we'll be keeping an eye on this year. Anything else for race launches?
My final edition would be across Andes. I was in Chile for the best part of 18 months in the past 2 years, and across Andes was one of the races that I went and followed. And it moves around Chile. Chile is the longest country in the world, so it has a plethora of different landscapes. And last year was down in the middle of Patagonia, and they typically stick to one route for 2 years and then they move again. And next year they moved to a new location, and it's in the Araucanía region of Chile, which is where all the monkey puzzle trees are. It's part of the Lake District. This part of Chile, I think, was just stunning. It's full of the forests, the waterfalls, the lakes, and volcanoes.
So it's high altitude as well?
A little bit, not too much. I don't think much of the route goes over 2,000 meters. I've never seen a route that passes 9 volcanoes.
No, I mean I have looked at across Andes, and to be honest, the last couple of years that route, I'm not sure how inspiring it's been for me. Mainly because it looked like it's just a quite a long out and back on it, which I guess is because of it's pretty remote. There's not much in the way of trails and roads, and it's a lot of mountains. And I think it is billed as a gravel event, isn't it, for pretty much gravel bikes?
Yes. So the past 2 years have been predominantly road because it followed something called the Carretera Austral. But now it goes much further north. It's in a much more populated area, still fairly remote, especially compared to the south of England. But it does have a heaven of gravel riding. And if I was still in Chile, I'd be thinking about going. I loved it down there. But it is the other side of the world.
It is, for me, and that's another factor. I mean, being in Europe, it's a long, long way to go. And the race isn't that long in terms of ultra races. It's a short, long one, I think we could probably say. So yeah, for me, it's got to be, like, I've got no problem riding out and back, but going all that way for a 4 or 5 day race where a good chunk of it is on the same road twice.
Yes.
I struggled a bit, but then I saw that they had released the new route, and it does look a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
And the first 2 editions look stunning as well, right high up north.
This one also, the past 2 that have been in the middle of Patagonia, they've been quite wet and cold at times. This one's much more likely to be really quite warm and dry, especially further north on the route.
Sounds better.
Much better. It could then be a holiday, but it sits in the middle of November. Props to them, actually, for having the 2025 edition ready now, given their race only finished a couple of weeks ago. But they really have to be because it's a Southern Hemisphere route and they're catering to the Northern Hemisphere riders. So
big commitment, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It's a huge commitment for them, but it sounds like I'm plugging it and like I'm on commission for any race entries. They don't really need any more race entries. They're plenty busy enough. It
seems popular, doesn't it? Really popular. And it's good because you see quite a lot of like local riders as well on the start list.
Packed full of Chileans. And we actually at Dotwatcher, we released an infographic recently looking at it's an analysis of our Bikes of Across Andes 2024 feature, because what struck me was just how many of the bikes are really high-end bikes. It felt like everyone was on a carbon bike with carbon wheels, electronic shifting, and true that the infographic showed there was about 50% of riders on electronic shifting, which I think is nicer than any European race I've seen.
Yeah, I guess there's less opportunities down there as well, though. So, like if you put a race there and there's nothing else, people are going to come to it, generally speaking. And there's a big cycling culture in these countries. And
huge.
The sport is growing, and the awareness is growing. And then suddenly, if you don't have a race, but you've got a lot of cyclists, and you kind of once created, people are going to go to it. So.
And people do love Across Andes. They're very loyal. It was one of the races where I actually saw the winner hang around until the finishers party a few days later. Normally, they've gone back home and they're back to work by then.
But like I say, if the winner is from Europe as well, you can't just go to Patagonia for 4 days and then go home quick. It's got work. You've got to go for a good 2 weeks and make the most of the trip and the experience. So yeah. So talking about a really hot race, well, it's not a very smooth segue, but our next race is a very cold race. So you may have heard of the Bright Midnight, organised by Justina Sliveka, who's Tour de France, Tour de France champion.
Christ, Josh. Not supposed to be the home of fake news.
Oh, no. Well, he may have been, but so Justina's he won the Tour Divide and set an FKT on that route this year, but he also organises the Bright Midnight race, which kind of the clues in the name. It's almost in the Arctic Circle. So in the middle of summer, there's like half an hour of darkness, if that. It's kind of dusk. So he's run that for 2 years now, but he also does a lot of winter riding. At the moment, it's covered in snow. He lives in a small town called Tolga, pretty much in the centre of Norway. But I was riding with him this week. He's over in the UK, and he was telling me about the Fat Midnight. The one thing about fat bike races is you need a new bike, essentially. You need a fat bike with big tyres. And, I don't know about you, Beccy, but I'm probably not going to buy one to ride around Cambridgeshire with no snow. You might ride it twice in a year. So there's a massive barrier to entering these events. And then you need all the warm kit and the clothing and things like that. Justinus's idea is to basically break down the barriers to, trying fat bike racing. And the Fat Midnight is going to be, it's a series of events, I think. This is the king of chaos, so I don't think we've got any clear dates or facts yet. But he said to me there'll be a series of weekends in March. So probably a couple of weekends whereby you sort of enter the event as such, and then you have your accommodation, and the bikes are provided by Trek, who obviously support Justinus. He's got a fleet of bikes, fat bikes, so you can travel out. You don't need to take a bike with you, so that makes it a bit more cheaper, a bit more accessible. And then you can, ride around in the snow and do a series of big loops. And one of the weekends there will be a race. So I guess one way to do it would be to go for the first weekend, learn the basics, experience the cold, and then maybe race the weekend after.
Interesting, because racing in the winter is a completely different skill set. It's as much keeping yourself alive as it is pushing the pedals, I imagine.
Exactly.
I don't know much growing up near Bristol. But you've also missed what I think was the key selling point.
Which was?
The sauna.
Yes, the saunas. I did mention that. So as part of this kind of the camps, there'll be things like saunas, and you can go like cross-country skiing and basically have a winter experience, which I think is really great. And if you want to do a race, there's the option. So keep an eye out for, I guess the Bright Midnight socials will probably have information coming, but I can tell you at the moment Justinus won't post anything because he's in the UK and we're doing loads of riding over the next weeks. So it's it will happen when it will happen when it happens. But keep an eye out for that, because I think it's a really cool event. It's not going to be one of the big key events, but if you're kind of fat bike curious, I am. I would love to do things that you see like Arrowhead over in the States, the Iditarod or Bike Invitational.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Fat Viking that happens in January in further north in Norway. And there was always Ravomli 150, which I think 300, wasn't it? That's no longer exists. But again, they're all races I'd love to try, but I'm not going to buy a fat bike and all the gear to sit in the garage for most of the time. So this is great for a taster. So it's worth having a look.
And there's a sauna. I think I'd be in the sauna the whole time. You can keep the bike as soon as I won't be needing that. Just give me the keys to the sauna.
So there we go. It was hot news after all, not just cold. On to the next news topic.
The other end of the continent, really, from close to Nordkap down to the bottom of Europe. The Battle of the Strait is a race that you've put on the list here. It's shortened to BOTS, which I thought was quite good. The Strait being the Strait of Gibraltar. And I think you've picked up a bit more information than I have.
Yeah, it's a race I've actually been following the past year or so. And it was supposed to run this year in November, but it never happened. I think there wasn't enough entries. And I was quite keen. I didn't enter it because I wasn't sure what I was going to do at that time of year. It's in November, I think, the start of November. But it sounds like a nice concept. It's, I guess, similar to something like TCR when there's set checkpoints and a few parkour. Starts in Tarifa. I think one of the checkpoints had just been released. It was Gibraltar. There's one near Ronda in Spain, and then a few kind of Sierra Nevada, that kind of direction. Then you get the ferry across to Morocco through the Rift Mountains, and then you take the ferry back from Morocco to back to Tarifa. Well, you can make your own route, but that's probably what I do. Or I think you could actually go the other way around as well. I think there's no set direction, but it seems like a nice event, cool event. I love Morocco. I love Andalusia, so definitely want to keep an eye out.
Who doesn't love a ferry either?
And ferries. I never did. I always thought it was really stupid having a ferry in a race. And then I did Gran Guanche, and actually it's pretty damn good. It's like forced rest.
Yeah, I remember at Two Volcano Sprint a couple of years ago, Pierre Francesco won, and he intentionally rode the ferry back and forth twice just to get a bit more time sat down, recharging things. And I thought I'd never use Had anyone ever thought to use a ferry as a hotel before? So
It's
now
perfect.
I'm all for them.
And well, there's obviously controversy on this year's TCR because there's a ferry from probably to Durrës in Albania. I think it's a Bari one, is it, that it's going to be used? Again, check out the route video on TCR, but that'll upset a few people for sure. But I would like to remind people that in the very first editions of TCR, 2013, the one I did in 2014, my first one, people did take that ferry, and it was a legitimate option going down Italy. So again, you get a really big rest on these kind of things, and it's part of the tactics. So
will there be a sauna?
That depends on the ferry. I mean, I went on one on the way to a Curse last year. I don't think there was a sauna, but there's definitely a soft play area and a disco. So, So there we go. Right. What's next in the news?
Next in the news.
The factual news.
Yes. This first half of the news, which is just the real news, is we're at risk of wanging on about this all the time. But one thing that cannot go unnoticed from this year's riding is Justine's Triple Crown ride, which for anyone who doesn't know, there is a little debate about what is the Triple Crown in bikepacking, but I think to most people it's, and in this context certainly is, the Colorado Trail Race and then the Arizona Trail Race, which happen from Tour Divide is the second Friday of every June, correct, Josh?
Yeah, that's the sort of traditional start outside the youth hostel in Calgary. Sorry, Canmore. No, not Canmore, Banff. I'm tracing through my journey to get to Banff. Oh, Jesus.
Listing off all the tourist hotspots in
as I said,
Canada.
The reason you're here, Becky, is to provide facts.
And so the Triple Crown takes place over the summer, really, through Canada or North America, in effect. And Justinas announced that he'd be... No, hang on. He didn't announce at the beginning of the year that he was going to do it, did he?
No. Ulrich Bartholomew announced it, and obviously Justinas raced him at the Tour de beat Uber at the Tour de, and then decided that if he was going to do it, then then Justinas should also do it. So he then decided he was going to travel to the Colorado Trail Race, which, well, we'll come on to that later maybe, whether he actually won it or not. But he was the first rider, and then the Arizona Trail has just gone in November. Which again he won, and I don't think he set an FKT because there's some fire diversions and things, or forest track closures. But yeah, I mean that's incredible. I mean, I think the record holder before was JP, and I think Justinas took almost 2 days off the overall time, which was phenomenal. And adding to the fact that he's travelled across the Atlantic 3 times this year.
I was really surprised.
Back to that.
With Justinas, the Tour de Ville I thought was a race for him, potentially the race for him, given it's long and dirt roady. But I've always thought of the Colorado and the Arizona Trail races as being really technical, proper mountain bike races. And I don't think he has that skill set. I get the feeling that he did well solely on his physical capabilities and his bikepacking experience, not necessarily his technical riding.
I think he's better than you think. Well, kind of evidently, but he does do a bit of riding. He's not like an out and out mountain biker, but I think he started getting into cycling through mountain biking. Obviously, where he is in Tolga, there's a lot of trails and things in the summer when the snow's not there. He basically rides everything. He rides mountain biking. He's not a mountain biker as such, but he did it, and he's just incredibly strong and determined. We were chatting the other day actually, went for a long ride, and he was saying, he thinks he's so good. Obviously, he's talented, he's strong. He thinks it's good because he can eat so much. We were talking about sort of long races, and I was like, yeah, well, because I'm going to do Atlas in February. It's like, I don't want to go into it too skinny because I always lose loads of weight. And he was saying, I put weight on in races. It's like, how can you put weight on during these long races?
Yeah.
So I think maybe, the key is for him fueling. He can just pack it in and, has the energy.
It down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being able to eat what you want, where you want, and sleep where you want, when you want, are such key skills.
Exactly.
In these types of races.
And you look at, sorry to bang on about road racing again, but one of the biggest changes in like training and stuff in the last sort of, well, not even 5 years is nutrition. And these riders are packing in fuel and stuff, 130 grams of carbohydrates. So they're basically 130 grams of sugar an hour.
Right.
Essentially in their systems. Imagine that. Imagine getting a bag of sugar and pouring half it into a bottle and drinking it every hour. But it's like a race car. If your race car wants to go fast, you make sure there's enough fuel in there, and the body's no different. So if you can eat a lot, it helps your recovery, and it's the net effect, especially on a long race like Tour de, where essentially you're emptying the tank a little bit more every single day until there's not much left, and that's why Tour de is hard. It's not hard in the sense it's a hard track. It's just long, and you're out there and exposed for a long time, and obviously Justinus is made for it, and and he can ride his bike as well. You've got to be able to ride your bike for Colorado and Arizona. There's no two ways around it.
One of the things I hadn't fully appreciated about the Triple Crown, or specifically the Triple Crown Challenge, which is doing those 3 races within the same calendar year, it's just the cumulative fatigue that you rack up, starting early to mid-June with Tour de, which is, for Justinus, was just over 13 days of racing. And then a couple of months later, you're racing again at the Colorado and then at the Arizona. So I did a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation. Justinus raced 5.5 days in, I put it at about 5-month period.
On the Triple Crown, that is. He also won the Atlas Mountain Race and raced the Fat Viking.
Yes. And
he did Badlands after Arizona,
Oh, he never has a day off, does he?
No, exactly. So yeah. I think one of the key things, so Lawrence Sendam did it, and obviously he's ridden Tour de France's and stuff, and I think he was saying after that, and also Alex Howes, he did it. Did he do it last year? No, the year before. And he had a power meter and all the data and stuff. And essentially, he was saying the Tour Divide is as hard, if not harder, than the Tour de France in terms of numbers. But obviously, Tour de France, you're maybe riding harder for short periods of time, and then you're fully recovering. The Tour Divide, you're just grinding yourself down. So yeah, it's legitimately a tough event and hard on the body. And I don't quite know how Justinus has soaked it all up. But he obviously recovers, and fair play to him. So yeah, I mean, we've gone off on a tangent here, but I guess the news was that he has set a new FKT for the Triple Crown Challenge.
Yes.
So yeah, well done to Justinus.
Well done. And we now move on to your next section, which I've named.
Yeah, this is, well, I've called it rumours and Becky's called it unreliable news. But I'm looking forward to this section. So this may be semi-factual. Some of it might be linked to truth. Other bits I've just made up. And some things we're going to wildly speculate on. So those of you who follow Atlas Mountain Race and the Silk Road Mountain Race and also Hellenic, that's the 3 events from Nelson Trees, and there's been a cryptic 4th mountain race Instagram account and lots of rumours over the last year. I think Nelson's fed out little bits and people have been kind of making up or trying to guess what this race is going to be.
Yeah.
I've spent a bit of time with Nelson over the last week, and I'm going to add to it. Well, I think it's been announced anyway now by this point. The 4th mountain race in the series will be in Turkey, which makes a lot of sense. I suspect. Well, I don't suspect. I know it's gonna start somewhere in the region of Antalya, kind of down in the south in the centre. Well, that's kind of the facts I have. So I think we should just make some stuff up about it now.
He is looking at holding it you said in October? Is that right?
Well, again, speculating. Essentially, when the 2nd edition of the Atlas Mountain Race was massively delayed by COVID, and that was in the start of October, which seemed like a really good, if you look at the calendar, it's a good spot. There's not too much else on, certainly if it's late October. So that would make a logical time for the 4th mountain race to take place.
Yeah.
And also in terms of organising, it's one every 3 months for Nelson. So yeah, I think that it could be then. However, I'm not sure. I reckon Hellenic in May, and this one may get swapped around.
Interesting. I did wonder if Nelson might have set a few canary traps where he feeds different information to different people, see which bit leaks, and then
100%. Exactly. So this is why we're it's wild speculation. I have some of it, on fairly good knowledge, and it'll be a loop. I think it'll be a looped route, probably longer than the Atlas, in between Atlas and Silk Road in terms of distance and time. I suspect, I don't know, similar to a Curse maybe in terms of 6-7 days for a win. I would have thought. Again, that is speculation.
Probably a mountain bike
we don't know
route.
what it's called though.
No,
I
we
think
don't.
it's 100% the mountain bike route.
Okay.
However, I've been doing some investigative journalism, also known as Googling Antalya and then seeing what mountain ranges are close by. So I think the 4th mountain race is going to be called the Taurus Mountain Race.
Okay.
And you heard it here first. So
because Taurus
the
is
Taurus
the
Mountain Race.
Okay.
That's the mountain range that is inland from Antalya in the direction that I suspect that the event is going to go. So yeah, maybe that's news. Can we call it news, or is that still a rumor?
No, that's news. If we say it enough times, Nelson's going to have to call it that because
The
that's what
Taurus
people
mountain
know it
race.
as.
Or he's going to hear this and then it's just going to change it anyway. So there we go. We'll see what happens there.
So you have a name for the Taurus Mountain Race in October 2026.
Or maybe May.
Something like that.
So yeah, I think you've kind of figured out what the unreliable news section is all about now. The next rumor, which I think I heard it with some authority, but it was at the TCR launch, and I'd had a few beers by that point, so I can't remember who told me. So it might still be a rumor. The Trans-Pyrenees, the Lost Dot race, the third of their events. Actually, I've got another rumor about them as well. A fourth event for them, but have you heard that rumor?
No.
Yeah.
No, I haven't, but I wondered it. It just seems like everyone's expanding their calendars.
We'll save that for another one, but there we go. So the Trans-Pyrenees route for it's October, so October 2025 next year. Generally, it's predominantly road and sometimes a little bit of gravel. So it's again there's set parkour and checkpoints similar to TCR, but they quite often use the whole of the trans. What do they call it? The Trans-Pyrenees kind of road route that goes across all the big classic kind of cols of the
Pyrenean Raid.
Yeah, the Pyrenean Raid. Yeah, that's normally like basically kind of you almost plan it out one way and then you ride that, which is essentially fixed route on the way back. However, the rumor I've heard, and I can't remember if I actually heard it from the race organizer or someone else, so it's definitely a rumor, is that it'll be a bit more gravel and that every parkour will be set of gravel, which would make a lot of sense, seeing as they have the TCR, which is obviously the number one road race. I think globally in the calendar, I would have thought in terms of prestige. Well, predominantly road. Everyone always cries about the gravel every now and again, and I'm sure they will again this year. They have the Accursed race, which was obviously introduced this year, which was excellent. I rode it. It really was good, and that is a mountain bike race, or I'd say it's a mountain bike race. And then if the Trans-Pyrenees was a bit more gravelly, then I think that would be make a nice set of races. Kind of a very round set of races.
Yeah.
And again, it gives you an option to do a Lost Dot Triple Crown. Some people like
Josh. The hat
But what
trick.
are we calling Nelson's triple? There's the Triple Crown for Nelson, which a lot of people are doing. A lot of people are doing next year, by the way.
It's something like the Nelson hat trick.
I think it should be the full Nelson.
The full Nelson. Oh, he's gonna love that. Yeah, that's it.
So
that's it. We call it that.
If you want a full Nelson, it's got to be. If you want an easier one, you've got to do it in 2025 because it might be a bigger full Nelson in 2026.
Yeah.
Should we get on to some rumours about people actually doing events, seeing as we're talking about the full Nelson?
So it's almost not a rumour. Some of the women who are doing the TCR next year, because of the 100 TCR Women hashtag, a lot of women have announced that they are looking to, it's not guaranteed that they'll be on the start line, but they're looking to get there. And that includes, I think, the biggest names in women's bikepacking.
Is this a fact or a rumour?
So what is truth anymore, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I picked up that Leo might be doing it
Yes.
before talking to you, and if she does, that's going to be big for the transcontinental race because Leo has a reach beyond just the usual crowd, and it will bring everyone up, and there's going to be a lot of women out there who want to sort of beat Leo because she's seen as the number one, and that's going to bring the competitiveness at the front of the field up.
Exactly. It doesn't just get more women on the start line, it gets more fast women there. And it's an interesting tactic because so rarely do we see people announce their calendars at this time of the year of one of the best riders in the world to do it. Kind of laying down the flag, or she's kind of like shaking the red.
Laying down the gauntlet.
Laying down the gauntlet. Thank you, Josh.
There you go. And I know there's a lot of people that would, like to beat Leyland.
Yes.
Probably...
Men and women.
Can. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sure I know a lot of men by beating them. And that's the other thing as well. Well, I think I'm ruining a later segment, but I think they bring the level of the women's race up so much higher. And because there'll be closer gaps, because there'll be more fast women. I mean, we've seen it over the men's race the last few years. It just pushes you on because there's always someone in touching distance. So I think there'll be more than one woman in the top 10 overall.
Judging by the Instagram hashtag, Jana Kessenheimer, who was first woman this year, and Jamie Wilson, who was second woman this year. They're looking at racing.
Going?
Yeah, she wants to.
Jamie's a ferocious competitor. It'd be really great to see Jamie there.
Alongside Cara Dixon and Cynthia Carson, who was supposed to line up this year but had an accident on the bike beforehand, so couldn't. So she hasn't even had a go. And between them, they're some of the best bikepacking women on bikes. So we'll be sat in the comfort of our own homes commentating on this in a couple of months. Well, let's slog at it across Europe.
It's going to be really good. And like you were saying, I mean, there's a lot of really strong, talented women who haven't necessarily ridden that distance, which can go one of two ways. So I think it'd be an exciting race to follow. But there's only one way to learn how to do these long races. I mean, everyone has to ride the TCR for the first time. And I actually had some comments under the video I did saying, it's too much, it's too hard to do for a first time. But there's only one way to learn how to ride that distance, and that is to ride that distance. Riding and racing, I mean, even when you're racing, you're basically surviving. You just survive a little bit faster than the other people. And you will make mistakes.
I'll take your word for it, Josh, because I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's still the same. And this is it's a bit of a tangent, but even like when, well, I'll bang on about the TCR in 2015, because that was probably one of the last races I'll ever win. I mean, I went pretty deep and pretty hard, and I was younger then and more stupid and a bit less, I didn't protect myself so well in terms of digging a hole. But I made mistakes, but I learned things from 2014 into 2015, and I wouldn't have won it in 2015 had I not just done it in 2014 and learned the lessons. And 2014, I made so many mistakes. And if you're really strong, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It's you can't. I don't think you can line up and expect to win the first time round. It does happen, obviously. With Fiona, she's proven it. But I think you need to do one, get it under your belt, and just learn and see what happens to your body, because you can do a 4 or 5 day race, but that's different to nearly 10 days. And everyone's bodies, they kind of react differently. So it'll be good, and I really hope there's a really strong start list, which I think there will be. And it's going to be great to watch. And like I said, I think the guys are going to have to push.
Yeah.
And there's some rumours about some fast guys taking part as well. I think there'll be a huge focus on the women's race, but I think the TCR is just one people want to win. I don't think Robin Gimpelli, this year's winner, is going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But Justinas is talking about giving it a go. So that'd be interesting. See how he can go. See how he can make his own route without getting lost.
Oh, yeah. Has he done a free route before?
Not very well. And that's the other thing. It's not just about pedaling. It's about everything and planning and preparation beforehand. I mean, I think Fiona is just like was the golden sort of leader of that. I mean, look who's tried to win it overall first time and probably could. Like Ulrich, he couldn't win it. Abdullah, Robin Gimpelli, that's his third attempt.
Yeah.
So, and actually, Christoph Strasser, he did win it his first attempt. But he learnt on the job on the way. It was a slow he didn't just ride off the front. He kind of was slower and kind of learn, and then kind of you could see him improving in his first win.
Yeah, and I would argue he's an anomaly, given he had ridden across America.
Yeah, he's a proven ultracyclist as well. So.
Yeah.
But it was his first big unsupported race, which is subtly different.
But anyway, looking ahead to 2025 again, you mentioned Robin Gimpelli.
Yeah, well, this is kind of a semi-factual
best kind.
rumor. Well, basically, Robin put a semi-cryptid post on his Instagram the other day saying he was going to race in June and August, and he's down as a pair for the Atlas Mountain race. So that tells me I think he wants to win the pairs overall.
Yeah.
With one of his mates. Bearing in mind, Robin's mates, he was the guy he's world class. He was on the Swiss national team as like a junior under 23 for cross-country mountain biking. And they normally get 3 or 4 in the top 10 of the world. That's the level. And he was on the Scott SRAM team, as it was, I think, then, with Nino Schurter, who is just the best cross-country mountain biker.
Is this Robin or is this his pair?
No, Robin Gimpelli.
Jesus, I didn't know some of this.
Yeah.
He's really quite good then, isn't he?
He is really quite good, yeah. I mean, he's on a TCR, and an Atlas and things like that as well.
Gosh.
So this is why I'm quite excited to see what will happen. So he put this post out. I know he's down on the list for Atlas, and Nelson was saying he wants to try and win as a pair. I don't know much about his pair, but I mean, if you're training with Robin, you're going to be fast.
Yeah.
But a race in June and a race in August. Yeah, maybe. So a race in June, obviously, once you've won the TCR, I mean, you're not going to do small races, are you? So do you know any big races in June?
I actually do know of one. Another transcontinental, I guess, the Tour Divide.
Yes. So
Is that what you were looking for? That's the
I
answer you were
was,
looking
yeah.
for.
I was just, wondering what you
Judging
were
by
going to
the
say
notes
there.
you've written for us, I think that's what you wanted.
So Tour Divide for Robin, and then a race in August. So I imagine Silk Road Mountain Race, and I think, I don't know, it's hard to win both. I know Sofian's done it, but I also know the toll it took on Sofin and his body. And I know Justinas has done the two the other year, or the year we were there, and he ended up with fluid on his lungs and pneumonia. It's tricky. So I think, I don't know, I get the feeling Robin could definitely win Silk Road Mountain Race.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it might be like an experience gathering type thing and just a bit of an adventure.
If he did, who else has won TCR and Silk Road?
No one, I don't think.
No.
So there we go. Could be a first one. If he won TCR, Tour Divide, and Silk Road, we could call that Triple Crown as well.
Yes, all sorts, all different ones. There's
Yeah,
3
just
different
make it up.
continents as well.
So yeah, that's I think that's a semi-factual rumor. I also heard Megan Hakkinen might be going to Silk Road, which would be interesting as well. She was obviously fastest woman on Tour Divide.
Yes, and TCR. Was she
Oh, it'd be
fastest
good
woman on
to-
TCR last
Yeah,
year?
she was actually. Yeah, no, year before maybe, or she was
Okay.
certainly first or second. I can't remember exactly. Did she beat Jamie when Jamie was second?
Possibly. Gosh.
Oh, yeah, you're in charge of facts, Becky. Anyway, luckily for you, this is the rumour section, so that doesn't matter too much. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be some exciting racing, and generally the level across the board is going up. Men's, women's, well, I mean, arguably just across the board, because, like I say, I think that the TCR is going to show that the women are going to be right up there and like in the top 10 and pushing the guys and upsetting the guys, which would be funny.
Well, that would be brilliant. That's all I want to see.
Yeah.
At the end of the Unreliable news section, I have put your name, which hopefully we can get some more reliable news on as to what you're planning on racing next year.
Yeah, that's not really the right place for it, because the fact is I've entered the full Nelson. So I'll be at Atlas in February, Hellenic in end of May, and then hopefully head out to Kyrgyzstan in August. Although I've not had my entry accepted yet, so only if Nelson will take me.
Yeah, let's hope. I can't imagine you'll find many reasons to keep you out.
Well, depends if I've given away the name of his 4th race in this podcast, doesn't it? So could have shot myself in the foot. So yeah, that's my plans. How about you? Are you going to do any races or adventures?
No, I have nothing in the calendar. I had an accident in the summer, so I'm just waiting for a recovery, and I don't want to sign up to anything and put any pressure on it. So for the moment, no, I will just be talking about it, not actually doing it.
Excellent. Well, as long as you get your facts right, that's fine.
This is probably a good moment to move on to the last point to talk about is our year review. So we've picked a couple of categories, and we will, I don't know if we call them awards. Is that a bit grandiose considering this is our first episode?
I mean, that assumes we've got anyone listening and anyone cares. And I mean, to be honest, people might not have got it by now. They might have turned off a long time ago. So yeah, we'll just acknowledge some key events and people and organisers, and then make some bold predictions. I think we're not doing very well at this, actually. We've managed to talk about half the stuff in the previous things. So I guess we'll make it short and sweet, and then ramble on for another half hour anyway. So what was your race of the year?
My race of the year, I have put the Triple Crown Challenge. I know I'm bending the rules here, but given we do it ourselves, I think we write the rules. I've put the Triple Crown Challenge, but actually a specific focus on the Arizona Trail Race. And it's not so much a comment on the race itself, but more John Schilling, the race director's reaction to, I guess, conversations around FKTs on routes like Arizona, Colorado, Tour Divide. So he's introduced for 2025 something called the People's FKT. He'll no longer be officiating an FKT on the Arizona Trail because it changes, the route changes every year. By design, the Arizona Trail Race is on the Arizona Trail, and the eventual goal for the Arizona Trail is that it will be 800 miles of single track from Mexico to Utah, and that single track is still being built. So it changes every year on the route, and then also, like so many of the US trail races, it's subject to a lot of diversions because of the weather and the conditions. And I thought that was a really interesting point because we see, as Europeans, we see a lot of quite rulesy races, people kind of clamping down on things, whereas John Schilling's actually opening this up. And in the absence of any regulating body or governing body, he's allowing effectively the community to police and to an extent officiate the FKT on his race. which I just thought was really interesting and against the flow of what we see in.
Yeah, that's a really nice thing to do as well. And especially, there's so much controversy around Tour Divides and who can win, who can't win. Is it FKT? Is it not an FKT? Are they cheating? Are they not cheating? It's nice to have that kind of as a forum, I guess, to decide. So maybe that's something we can see grow for other events as well.
What was your race of the year?
It's a bit obvious, but the Tour Divide.
It's your favourite. You go to sleep thinking about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's weird. I've only completed it once, but I can pretty much, envisage the whole route. And obviously that was the original, and the first sort of TCR didn't exist when I first knew about it. And obviously I knew Mike Hall and followed him doing his events. And so yeah, I've got a soft spot for it. And obviously I've been doing the coverage of it, so I've kind of got a bit more in-depth detail. But this year, finally, the FKT was broken, and that's the chat every year, isn't it? Like, when's the FKT going to get broken? When's the record going to be broken? And this year it was, and it was a good race. And there's some good riders, and it was great to watch. So yeah, Tour Divide for me was the race of the year. And well, I know we're banging on about him a bit, but the next thing we have is Rider of the Year, which for me goes hand in hand. It's got to be Justinas. I mean, that's we talked about it a bit on the FKT. He won Tour Divide. He won the Colorado. Well, he was the fastest rider. There was a small kind of infringement on the rules whereby he broke a wheel. He smashed into a rock and cracked a rim.
How you ever come back to be anywhere in the race after that is beyond me. But getting back up to the front as well.
Yeah, but he basically had to take a taxi to Leadville to get a new wheel, and then went back. But then there wasn't in the rules. It says, well, it didn't stipulate specifically in the rules. There was a kind of a FAQ underneath, sort of clarifying that all movement must be human powered. I.e., if you get in a taxi or a car or hitch a ride, you're essentially disqualified. And Justinas didn't read the rules, and that's what he did. I don't think he did it intentionally, but he did it. So therefore, despite the fact he was the fastest person to complete the Colorado Trail race this year, he didn't have an official time, but they allowed it to stick for the Triple Crown, which is great. And obviously he won the Arizona Trail as well. And like I said, all of that, including transatlantic travel 3 times in a year, which takes a big toll on you. Mm-hmm. And he won the Atlas Mountain race, and he was like second in the whatever it was European Ultra Championships, and won the Fat Viking bikepacking, and he did Badlands, he did Desertless Bikers, he did another one in France that Stephen Leherick organises. So he's had a massive year, and I don't know how we can do it, to be honest. So yeah, my rider of the year, it has to be Justinas.
It's tricky. You can't really talk about 2024 without talking about him.
No,
it's an astonishing,
just from the volume of races, if not anything.
Well, yeah. Aside from how well he did. My rider of the year is Hannah Simon, a bit left field. I know we haven't mentioned her, but I followed her a bit through the trail races that she's done in the US, and she lives over there. So this year was the first year, I believe, that she raced outside of the US, and she came 29th at Atlas Mountain earlier in the year, which is a solid result. I got to meet her there,
which was really cool. Yeah.
And then she came 9th at Silk Road. And I just thought, a top 10 result at Silk Road is brilliant. And for a woman who had only this year started racing outside of the US, I thought was...
And again, you have to factor in the travel. Even for us, again, to Marrakesh, for me, I can leave my home and be there within 6 hours.
Yeah.
It's a 4-hour flight and, 1 hour drive to the airport, and you can get there. But even just to do that for a 4-5 day race, it's nigh on 24 hours of travel for people coming over from the States. And again, for Kyrgyzstan, it's a nightmare. You've got to fly to Europe or Istanbul or somewhere, then transfer on. All these factors that do kind of add up. And then they're not exactly easy races either. So,
no, exactly. Yes, my rider was Hannah Simon. Our last category is the organiser of the year. And I'll let you take this one first.
You know what? I'm a fan of Nelson's races. I think he's doing a good job. We're talking about the same old people here, but having done a few of his races now, I think he does a good job. There's not too many rules, but the rules that are there are very firmly kind of policed. There's no nonsense. Mm-hmm. You know where you stand, the routes are good. The races are hard and remote, but there's enough of a safety net there to pick up the pieces if it's really needed, but there's no sugarcoating. You're out there, you're going to be exposed, and I think they're good. They're good events, and if you want a real challenge, a calendar that's getting more and more crowded, I think any race organised by Nelson Trees is going to be excellent, and you're going to get a real adventure. But yeah, Nelson is my organiser of the year.
Okay. I saw that one coming, I have to say, Joe.
I know.
My organiser of the year is the Adventure Syndicate. So it's Phil Batty, Alice Lemkis, and Lee Craigie, and they organised the Tour de Farce, which we mentioned a bit earlier in the podcast. And it's impossible to summarise this race at the end of a podcast.
I mean, organise is not probably the term, to be fair.
Yeah.
Instigated.
And it was a multi-day stage race, riding from hostel to hostel in the Scottish Highlands where all three of them live. And they poured their heart and soul into this. And it was, I think, a good example of how a race can be a reflection of the organisers' values and their experience as bikepackers. So they were looking for good, hard riding, but they didn't allow... It had a no-fly rule. Everyone had to carry an egg. This was one of my favourite bits. And so before the race, a lot of people designed an egg carrying capability. And anytime an egg cracked, you got a time penalty. And there was a 1-minute silence at the end of the day in the hostel because blessed are the eggs. I'm surprised that a room full of adults cannot be silent for 1 minute, Josh. There was sniggering all around.
I know. But that summed up the event, though, didn't it? It was just great fun and it was really refreshing. I mean, there's quite a lot of formats for these races. And I was there myself, racing, and Beccy was there. And one thing I enjoyed was normally you end up with the same people. Normally I'm sort of towards the front of these events and you just see the same faces over and over. But because of the way it was set up, I was riding with different people every day, all sorts of different abilities, and we all hung out together. And I really, really did enjoy that. It was a good social. The riding wasn't easy. We're talking Fisherfield, which is probably one of the hardest sections in the Highland Trail 550.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, the weather was fairly good, but it was some long days.
Alongside the riding, they had various time penalties and bonuses as well. So you got bonuses for things like taking a swim, stopping at the pub, buying from a local cafe and restaurant, and then...
I never understood them, to be honest. I just rode, see what happened. Well, I was just surprised the day when we ended in the pub most of the afternoon.
Surprised me, Josh.
But I managed to take the yellow jersey, which was amazing.
As well as a time penalty for something that they calculated as the privilege tax.
Yeah, that wasn't great, was it?
Not for you, Josh, but that's the point. That's the bloody point, Josh.
Right, so that was our kind of mini review of the year. So let's just finish with predictions for 2025. What are your predictions?
Well, we're almost just summarising what we've said so far in the podcast. I was going to say I predict the most competitive women's race at the Transcontinental. Potentially not quite as a spicy year with Justinas. I'm assuming he's not going to do a Triple Crown again. I think it might be more of a normal year.
Yeah, you say that, but I think there'll be. I think the FKT on Tour Divide might get beaten again.
Surely not, Josh.
It depends on conditions, but if someone like Lawrence Tendam goes back, Robin Gempele, he's got the engine. I don't know if it all falls right, it could happen. I mean, if there wasn't any mud and decent conditions, it wasn't the best conditions this year, and it was set. Uber and Justinas have been pushing the last few years, so who knows? I mean, I'll put it out there now because that's kind of an easy prediction, to be honest.
I predict the slowest known time at the Tour Divide. Then I'll throw that in there.
So there we have it. That's our 2025 predictions, and that brings to an end the first ever Ultrascape podcast. So I hope you've enjoyed it. And if
to
you're
anyone who is actually listening, if you're actually out there,
if you are listening, thank you very much for hanging on this long. So it's going to be out once a month, I think we're aiming for, and probably some extras around the sort of busier times of the year. It'll be up on YouTube and also on podcast platforms. So if you'd rather listen and not look at our faces, then I can understand. So you should be able to subscribe in your kind of local or your kind of preferred podcast platform. So that's it for episode 1. We'll see you again in the new year. We'll be talking Atlas, a mountain race, and having a bit of a roundup of January. So thanks for listening, and thanks to Beccy for joining me.
Thanks very much, Josh, and to anyone who is listening, thank you as well. Thanks, man.
Yeah, and we'll see you all in the next one. So bye for now.
Bye.